Hey everyone, welcome back. Joe here again, ScaleFreak.com, coming to do the next video in the series for the Axial Racing SCX10 rebuild. You guys saw in the special announcement video or in the project announcement video that this is like a 4+ year old truck that has been beat down and over the years has seen itself a lot of wear and a lot of tear. What my goal is here is I'm actually going to piece by piece rebuild this truck and show you guys some of the things that I'm doing for upkeep, as well as some of the parts that you need to look out for, as well as some of the parts that I'm going to be upgrading just to kind of get it up to where I want it to be. For this video, I'm going to start with the axles. So as you can see, I left this pile pretty much exactly where I left it the last time you guys saw it. I haven't really touched anything. And what I'd like to do right now is I want to go through and clean up and rebuild the axles, kind of show you guys some of the things that you want to look out for, as well as I'm going to install the GCM Last Lockers instead of my stock lockers, and of course I'm going to put in the 4-link truss kit from GCM as well. This thing is going to see a lot of different parts from GCM go into it, so kind of step by step I'm going to add them as I go, and you can see exactly how I'm installing them and what I'm doing. So my first step here is going to be to clear away all the stuff I'm not working with today, clean up the work area a little bit. I really wanted to start it with exactly where I left off last time. And I'm going to show you guys a few of the things just to get it started. So give me a moment. I'm going to go ahead and clean up most of this mess. Now I've got all the other parts put away. I kind of put them on the other CowRC pit mat just to kind of keep them off camera and store everything where I want it. You can see my parts are still pretty dirty, and it all comes down to a matter of make sure everything is kind of clean as you're starting to get back into it again. I'm not much of one for cleaning most of my stuff on an average day, but when I'm doing a full teardown or a rebuild like this, yeah, I do actually want to make sure that it's clean and it's good to go. A couple of things that I find work really, really well for cleaning is if you use something like a Simple Green that you can pick up from any hardware store, really. I also like to use like a glass cleaner or an all-purpose cleaner that usually works pretty well for my parts. And it's just even if you're just starting by spraying them down, just to kind of soften up the dirt a little bit, it'll help you wipe stuff off. And then I use usually like a microfiber cloth. It usually helps get stuff cleaned up pretty good. This tends to not damage anything, but of course, before I'm done putting this whole truck back together, I am going to go over every single little part and make sure that it's cleaned up really nice, including all my bearings and inspecting them and making sure that not only are they clean, but they're not worn out or anything like that. So I'll be repacking those all with new bearing oil and things like that no matter what. So even if I get cleaner in them, it's okay. It's fine. So again, like all it takes is a few seconds just to go through a part and clean it up. I'm not going to make these things pristine, but I do want to get kind of the general muddiness off of them just to help the fit and finish and just to inspect everything and get the grease out. Like look, I got a whole bunch of extra grease in here from the past, so just take a second and get it out. So you guys don't need to watch me do all this because you'll probably never see me clean anything again. So I'm just going to skip this part. Now everything's cleaned up quite a bit, actually. If I go through this thing is a mess now. Grease, grime everywhere. I've got it about as cleaned up as I'm going to get the general mud off of it. Now I'm going to go ahead and start doing some of the changes that I want to do, moving on to the kit that I know that I am. Now, keep in mind, on the back axle, you never actually, on an SCX10, you're not actually mounting a servo, in most cases, directly to the axle, so I'm going to nub these off from the back. But on the front axle, I'm actually going to be changing it to a chassis-mounted servo. So again, I don't want these on there. So for that, I'm going to use a Dremel to take them off. Now guys, remember when you're doing work like this, please get safety glasses. You can never ever predict where plastic is going to fly. So that's coming off. So get your Dremel up to speed and start doing work. So as you can see, I've got, again, the pillars off the one side. There's a little hole here because the screw would go all the way down. I'm actually going to wind up using a plastic filler in there just to seal that off. And I'm going to take a little bit more time with the Dremel in a bit and just smooth this out a little more. For camera purposes, I was kind of not paying complete attention and trying to make the shot look good. So it's a little uneven, but that's fine. I'll even it out. and take all that off, and I'll get the other one again evened out as well. So when this goes together, it's going to go together just like that, and then you're going to see it's going to look more like a real axle rather than having those prongs sticking up. That may help as well when it comes to snag stuff, like things that you could get tangled on. So again, it's just another option to get that off of there. So give me 1 second. I'm just going to clean up this one as well and get them both looking really good. Now I've got those done. You can see here I've gone ahead, and again, I just went through and I did it with the grinding disc real quick. I'll probably take a piece of sandpaper to this at a later time after I get the filler and stuff and sand it down nice and smooth. I also took off where the trusses go, because if you take a look, here's what the factory truss looks like, the stock axial truss. It goes to the center of your axle as well as all the way to the sides. So it actually bolts into the edges of the axle as well. But I am going to be updating it to the GCM 4-link trusses. Just open this one up here, which you can see is a significant bit difference. So it actually just covers just the center of the axle, actually, just the center of the axle like this, so it doesn't have to go all the way to the ends like that one does. So I went ahead and just hack those off as well. I'll smooth all that out later with a good, better piece of sandpaper, and I'll fill those holes and stuff like that so that it will be more of what I want it to be. So again, look at the difference of the size if you went with one to the other. There's the stock, there's the GCM. So, and this one's made out of metal too. So I'm going to do that to these as well. That'll be a part of these steps, and I'll pull this apart and reuse those links. So the next step, again, I've cleaned everything up, and guys, I can't stress enough, make sure you use some kind of eye protection, especially if you're left-handed, because this particular Dremel, the way that it turns, if you're left-handed, you're shooting everything at yourself, and that was some pretty burning hot plastic that landed in my face. So guys, make sure that you're being safe. Please guys, be safe. So again, first thing we're going to do is I want to go ahead, well, I guess it's the second thing now, is I'm going to swap over the way my differentials are right now. Now, the stock internals of these diffs are old, very, very old actually. So they've been used lovingly for years, and they're pretty worn out. I'm sure you guys have seen in a different video exactly how much play was left over on the insides of these differentials when you put the axles to it. And the problem with that is you know, you're trying your best to keep the wheels as locked as possible. It's kind of all a part of what we're doing. But when you do that, guys, this is an amazing tool for pulling stuff apart. when you're pulling stuff, or when you've got too much play in your wheels, it's not working exactly how you want it to. So make it better. So the GCM Last Locker is actually going to lock down onto the axles, and I'll show you guys exactly how that works. So give me 1 second. I'm going to pull these apart. With these differentials apart, you can see the stock. The stock is a plastic cup, and then it's got this kind of iron cross in the middle. Basically, it's all cast. Now, these are not bad. Like they worked really well for a really long time, but over the years, they've just it's developed a little bit of play in here. If I hold it like this, a little bit of play on one side, and then it's to the other side, and then the diff cup, and it all magnifies by the time it gets to the end of the wheel. And it's a nice slide in, just literally like slide it in. It's like a plug and play. Both axles go in, and there's room for a little bit of movement and stuff like that. So it's very forgiving. But again, I'm building a purpose-built, very specific to the G6. So I need a kit that's going to perform at the top level all the time, and that's when we come in with the GCM Last Locker. Now this one here you can see is a much larger piece. It's the same size as the overall diff cup, but it doesn't need to have that iron cross in the middle. I'll just set this stuff out of the way here, and what happens is the gear itself just connects directly to it, screws directly in, and then you'll see here there's some little screws, or some little set screw holes, and it comes with all the set screws that it needs. And all you do to install it is, well, first, get a little bit of Loctite. Always get a little bit of Loctite when you're working metal on metal. So just get it in, and then you're going to screw these in until they are flush. So here we go. Oh, and you're going to throw stuff all over the place because you're not paying attention. So you screw them in until they're flush, like that, And then, of course, you're going to go ahead and get this on there with the 4 screws that are included. Of course, guys, use Loctite with all of this because you obviously want it to stay. Now, this is the stock axial gear that I'm using for my rear. You'll see it's got these 2 big pins on it. You'll see that in the last locker, there actually are pins on it as well. So that makes a perfect guide hole to put it in there. Now, this one here, I'm using the overdrive kit for the front. So there's no set pins, so you just need to make sure that you line it up with all the screw holes. It'll only go one way, so just make sure you do it the correct way. So guys, give me 1 second. I'm gonna get both these diffs built. With these differentials built, you can see what the difference in the parts are going to be. So this one here, again, plastic cup with an iron cross in the middle. Well, I guess they're just cast steel. I call them an iron cross or a Maltese cross. And these ones here, the actual diff cup itself is the locker. So, you know, they got more weight to them, and they are solid units. So, again, what's going to happen is your axle is actually going to go into it, and then you're going to lock it down with the set screws. And that's how you get that put on. So first, I want to throw some bearings on these things because, of course, it's going to need bearings to go into the truck. 1 and 2. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab what is going to be my rear axle and just kind of set it in there. You can see how it's going to fit. And then, of course, throw bearings on my axles here and see exactly where it was going to fit in here. So I've already got one in one lockout, and I will stick this in the other lockout. I'm still using, on this kit, I'm still using the plastic axial lockouts. I have not upgraded on this rig yet. I will in the future, I just haven't yet. So make sure you got the right bearing and it fits in nice and snug. Then what you can do is just kind of sit it in here like that, and then just put this on the end so you see how it's going to fit. And the same with the other side. Just like this. And then see how it's going to fit. And you'll see here that, again, everything is free. Everything fits exactly where it's supposed to be. The rear axle is going to be super easy to do because everything is made to be exactly as long as it needs to be. So then what you're going to do to lock it down, because you see right now it's not locked down, it's spinning freely, is first just make sure that the flat spots are pointing up at you. So this one is. Just get it in there all the way. And then just tighten it a little bit. You don't want to crank it right down because you're actually looking to tighten these things evenly. You don't want to just, you know, crank it straight down. So then, of course, do the other one as well. Give it a couple turns, and then you're going to spin it over. Now, you're going to start to see that your axles are actually spinning with it, which means that you're starting to make contact with the axle itself. So, of course, give that one a couple turns. Give this one a couple turns as well. Make sure it's hitting the flat spot. And then you're going to continue to do that until you've got about the same amount of turns into each side, and it's going to be centered. And then what you can do at the end of that, once you get it all snugged in and centered, you make sure that it's actually the center of the axle. Just give it a spin and make sure that it's dialed center. You can see here, this one is not right now. If I do this, it wiggles a bit. So I'm going to spend some time playing with this one just to make sure that I do it correctly. So give me a few minutes. I'm going to do this off camera and just make sure that I've got this thing exactly centered. So I have the rear completely centered now, and I'm going to show you. So it's all locked in. Now I'm going to show you. I'm going to pull these off real quick and pull this out. Now you can see now it is all one unit. There is no play in this. It's like a spinning top now, and this is centered. The bearings are on there, and again, the biggest thing is that there is no more slop from wheel to wheel. You may still experience some slop, but that's actually going to be from you know, this gear right here. When you put that pinion gear on there, you may get a little bit of slop if you don't have it absolutely shimmed down, and then you may also get some slop from your drive shafts, but at least you've eliminated the slop from here, and that's the key thing, because now both of these back tires are going to be turning exactly the same. And of course, these are locked down with a set screw, so I've put the thread lock in there to make sure that it doesn't back out at all. But if you have to make adjustments later, you have to make adjustments later. Now, I will tell you that kind of the heads up, this is like when you're making a bulletproof kit. If something happens later on where you need to slide an axle out, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. You will have to pull apart your actual axle housing completely in order to get in there and loosen off these shafts. So you're making the commitment of a bulletproof truck, because if you snap one of these, which I have never done, then you will have to get into your axle to loosen, into your axle housing to loosen your axles out. And again, it would just be 2 screws per side. Then you can slide it out, make the adjustments you have to, put it back in, rebuild again. But in the years that I've been running my SCX10, I've never had to do that. Just make sure that your kit is up to snuff and all your parts are up to par, and you should be fine. So give me a minute. I'm going to go do the exact same thing to the front. There's really not going to be any difference as far as putting the front together. And hold on. To finish off putting the back end together, I'm actually just I'm gonna finish this before I go to the front. So first, remember to make sure you put your pinion gear back into your axle housing and make sure it's the correct one. If you're using an overdrive gear like I am on the front, the pinion gear is actually going to be cut a little bit differently. So make sure that you're matching the right pinion to the right drive gear that you've got connected onto your differential. And of course, don't forget to grease this up. You know, you can use a lot actually. I'm using the Avid slide in here, and I pretty much just make a mess of this. I like to do that gear because when I put this in, it'll obviously get all over here. You can see just like that. After this thing runs for a little while, this whole thing will stay nice and coated. Maybe just wipe it off this and get it back onto the gear again. So having a lot of grease and stuff in there is never a bad thing unless you're running through a lot of different sediment, which will get stuck in the grease, but I don't. So nice and in there, just like that. So that's going to keep it good to go in there. Now, of course, I'm going to cap this on here just like that. And then we're going to slap the ends on just like that. Now, for this as well, now that you've got this together, you can just test it to make sure it's all done correctly. I throw a shim behind my pinion gear to, this is an older one, so it reduces some of the play. Not all of the play, but some of the play. There is still a little tiny bit of backlash on this, but again, it just reduces some of the play. So again, that's on there. Now I'm just going to, I did not pull the screws out. You see there is 1, 2, 3, 4. Now when you're rebuilding this part of the truck, guys, please be sure to get the right length of screw. And the reason why I say that is because I've made this mistake in the past where I've put a screw that was too long in and it actually made contact with the drive shaft or with the axle. And then when that happens, you don't realize it at first, but what it's actually doing is causing a lot of drag and a lot of wear and tear onto your truck. And it's actually digging like a groove into your axle. If you have a powerful enough motor, like I use the Tekin 27 turn, or sorry, Tekin 35 turn. If you have a powerful enough motor, you will probably never know that you're making contact because the motor is actually strong enough to handle that. But you just don't put one that's too long in there. Make sure you check your manual to get the correct length. I'll give you a hint though that in the back they're a little stubby guys, little tiny ones. They're actually shorter than they look like they should be. And of course, if you're using something like the axial lockouts, that's going to be using, what is it? They use a little set screw, so it doesn't even make full contact. So that's actually a bonus as well. So get the screws back out and pop them back in. And that just holds the lockouts in. You just need to snug them up hand tight. And then, of course, turn it just to make sure that nothing is making interference. Because, again, interference is bad. It'll do a lot of drag on your battery as well. And then, of course, we're going to put the rest of the axle together, pop in those little nuts from the bottom. Sometimes, actually, I'll show you a tip. Just make sure you got the right one on there. It's easier to throw the nut onto the end of a 2mm hex and then just slap it in like that, and then bang, it's in. It can be a little tricky when you're trying to balance it all and make it all work, but again, just put it on. Boom, put your thumb there, and then that's in. So grab your 2mm, where did I put it? And then get these in. Remember guys, we're doing metal on metal, and these little nuts that are in the bottom of the axle are not nylock. So of course, we're using thread lock. Get it in there. Now you don't need to super tighten anything right now, because remember, you're screwing into you're screwing through a plastic housing, and the reason why it's important that I say you don't need to crank it down is because when you're screwing metal to metal, it's not going to strip. Instead, what you'll do is you'll crush the plastic housing to the point where nothing on the inside will spin freely anymore. You'll actually almost flatten it. So just screw it in as much as you need to make it fit correctly, and then move on. And then, of course, I am here using the GCM 4-link truss. So instead of using, again, we showed that earlier. Where did I put it? Right here. Instead of using the plastic one that's absolutely huge, we're using the GCM one. It is going to use the same hardware. So, of course, a little bit of thread lock, because the GCM part is made out of metal. Put it all the way through. It'll catch on the other side. And again, you don't need to crank it right down. As soon as the thread lock dries, for the most part, your screws are never going to move unless you want to move them. And that's it for the rear. So just test it. Make sure everything still turns well. You haven't tightened anything too far that you're actually crushing an axle housing. Make sure all the parts are in nice. Make sure everything flows smoothly. And I mean, that's really it. Now you've just installed your GCM Last Locker, and you've installed your GCM truss mount. So give me a few minutes. I'm going to go put the front end together off camera, and I'll be right back. Before I actually put the front end together, I'm glad I stopped on this one. I wanted to go through and update these CVDs that I use for the front. Now, these are the axial CVDs. I purchased these a long time ago, and I'm going to be reinstalling them back into this truck again. These things have been amazing. I've never had to replace any parts on them, but it's been a long time, so I do want to refresh them. We're going through the trouble of putting in the GCM Last Lockers to remove all the slop, but if you look here, there is slop in the end of my CVD now. Now, again, these things have been used for almost 4 years, and I've never had to replace the pins in them, so they are, I guess, what I might consider well past their life cycle. So what I want to do is actually refresh the setup with AX30463, which is just a new pin and a new barrel in the center. So that's all they really are. These parts do eventually start to wear out, or they may snap if you've got way too much weight in the truck. And then, of course, take a look at this itself. This has worn a small amount, but not excessive, not enough that I'm actually going to replace it. And I'm looking at the drive cup as well. The drive cup is really solid. So, you know, clean it out, because this is exposed to the element. This is dirty. Like, look, that's what's just inside there. Because I do grease these. And then dirt gets in there as well. So clean it up really nice, because you want to make it look good and run smooth. But again, we're going to be replacing the barrel and the pin. Super easy to do. All you do, pop the package, have your hobby knife handy. These are little parts, guys, so please be careful. Open it up. Now, I've done this before in a different video series, and I'm going to show you a couple tips that I like to do. Number one is add a little bit of grease to this already. The reason being is because when you put the barrel in, put it in so that you know exactly where the hole is. And then once you've got that in with the grease on there, the barrel doesn't fall out. So then you're going to grab this bad boy here, line it up so you can see the hole, and then just drop the pin in. Bang, just like that. Turn it sideways right away so that the pin doesn't drop with gravity, and then slide the retaining ring back on. Now again, it's removed some of the play. It's probably about half of what it was, because I'm not replacing this entire unit. There will still be some play, but it's reduced it quite significantly. Where's the other one? The other one here, you can see how much play there is there. This one here, you can see how much play there is there. So it is a significant difference on replacing the internals. Now these internals are still good. They're worn down a little bit, but they're still good, so keep them in your spare parts bin just in case you're out on the trail and something happens that it falls apart. And again, they're quick and easy to change even if you are on the trail, as long as you've got something to clean it up, a little tiny bit of grease. You don't need the grease, but it's helpful. But just make sure that you fix it over top of something so that nothing falls out. So give me a second, guys. I actually am going to build the front axle now. The finishing steps of the front end, you want to make sure that you're not losing important things like the top hats. I keep reminding every video that you want to make sure that you keep those things. They hold the C-hubs and the knuckles together, so of course you do not want to lose them. What I'm doing right now is I'm just applying a little bit of grease inside here. It's going to make life a lot easier when you're working with these, because you just slam it in, and then they're going to stay in there while you work on them. And then of course you want to slide it over like this, and bam, once it's in the axle, just like that. Of course, we're adding the last few screws in here now, so make sure you have the right bit on your driver. Make sure you grab the right length screw. Make sure you grab your Loctite, because here I'm actually using Team STRC C-hubs and knuckles, so it's metal on metal, and you want to make sure that you use Loctite for that. And that's really it. Oh, guys, also make sure that when you're doing this part that you are pointing your knuckles in the right direction, because remember, this is your front axle. It goes on the front, and if you're using a stock type setup, then the get that screw in there, hold on, then the steering linkage is going to be in front of the axle, so make sure you get that set up there. Additional note, if you are using a something like a Axial Racing C-hub and knuckle, just remember that they are clockable, so you want to make sure that you are using the right holes when you're putting everything back together. There's a lot of adjustments because it was made available for different trucks, so there's a lot of adjustments that you just need to make sure that you're using the right holes and the right setup when you're putting your truck back together. So just one screw left here. Almost done, guys. And that's almost it. Hold on. Make sure it lines up. There we go. And bam. Loctite it in. Front. Oh, look at that. What did I just tell you? Make sure you put it on the right direction. Anyway, I'll change that in a minute. See how easy it is to make a mistake when you're only half paying attention. So that's the two axles put back together. We've replaced all of the bearings. Almost. I almost forgot to put these bearings back in. We've replaced all of the bearings now. Gone through, put in the GCM Last Lockers. Also put in the GCM 4-link truss mounts on the top. Here's a tip, guys. If you can't get it in, use your hex, slam that sucker in there. There you go. Put on the 4-link house. Now, you're going to find later on that hardware that comes with it is going to be what you're going to use to connect the links to the top of that, and then that's going to be a nice, sturdy mount for your 4-link. You get it all back together again. Now, there's no play in here at all. It is locked solid. The only play you're going to get in the front is just because, like I said, those CVDs were just a little bit worn out, but I'm not replacing them just yet. So, guys, that's it for this video. I've got those put together. Thank you guys very much for watching. Next time you see these pieces, I should have all those holes and stuff like that filled in, so it should look a little bit better. And we'll go ahead and we'll start with, I don't know, what should we do next, guys? The chassis build. You guys tell me, what should we be doing next? So that's it, guys. Please remember, like the channel. Helps me out a whole ton. Of course, you want to make sure that you subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, thank you very much. Comment below. Let me know what I should make the next step. Remember, I still have the motor plate. I still have link rebuilds. I still have, well, I got to put the chassis together before I put the servo mount. I still have the transfer case. I still have the panhard kit. You know, these are all parts that are going to go on this truck. So, oh, and I've still got the shell. Let me know what the next step is, and share this with the community, guys. So, thanks again. Thanks a bunch. Thanks a bunch. Thanks very much, and have a great night.